there's definitely some stuff out there that people are not really taking into account.
Oh, totally. I mean, Dan, you can go even farther than that. And this is where, in my opinion, the fun stuff kicks in. And that's that. This is more about my personal approach to poker.
I still think there's quite some edge in there, at least in the way people approach things. It seems like people are missing how to deal with things, particularly that you can gain through node locking, and just are playing like a number of spots not really well. I don't think people take, at least, I mean, I personally don't go quite the extremes as the node lock might do. It might like start raising, like I've seen so many spots where it would raise like 33% of the pot or 33% of the time or more with like stone air, a lot of someone like c-bets too much, or things like that. And I just don't think people are doing like that anywhere near to the degree that perhaps they could. At least, and maybe they're doing it in like GG rig battles or some shit, ACR rig battles where I'm just like, I don't know, I'm not really that interested in that. Um, and yeah, I mean, I've had you run some reports, and it's also on some. We looked at some ICM based spots too, and it looked like really there's a lot to it. That it definitely looked like, even though the technical side is, I still think it's beaten to death quite a bit. It's still something that needs to be maximized on for anyone who's trying to take poker seriously, and there really is quite some edge. As a matter of fact, can you give a couple examples that you recall from your work that were particularly striking in well, poker? Poker would be better for the audience.
Yeah, totally. One of them is what you share. If the other side is c-betting too much, you can basically you can almost double, sometimes triple the amount that you check raise. And the reason why you use the small size is if they're c-betting everything, let's say like ace high, and they're supposed to, and when you check raise, they just have air that for them to continue, for your check raise to not be immediately profitable, they have to flow really, really wide. Not just backdoor, but like just two cards below the top and the middle card. And most people are just not comfortable doing that, especially when they're facing opponents that they don't know has done the work. They're just going to give up because the game evolved to the way it did for a reason. One of the things I love, and when I studied with Chewy and Nick, one thing that we always found amusing is when we go deep in the lab, either for straight up GTO or sometimes with no lock, is when we find a line that looks so donkey, that looks wrong, like min clicking with aces, that turn out to be actually GTO or donks in leading in general. Like there are a lot of leads in the big blinds, there are a lot of leads in the small blind that people are not doing, that in the solver world you're doing 10, 15, sometimes a third of the time, like monoboard. Monoboard, you late position open, small blind flat, you can lead on the mono, depending on the high cards, something like a quarter to a third of the time, depending on the board. People nowadays know to lead on from the big blind when it comes 3 low cards, but leading for the small blind is still pretty rare, and that people are not doing. And we can take that one step further, right? Okay, so you're supposed to lead from the small blind. People are not doing it. That also has implication for c-betting in position. Because if you run the sims allowing for leads in the small blind and people are not doing it, so when you bet into them, if you're supposed to bet 80% of the time and people are pure checking to you 100% of the time from the small blind, the 80% of the time often drops to something like 60 or even 50% of the time, because the range is a lot stronger. Just stuff like that it's not as necessary like some crazy sexy move that like Ali or Dabo are doing, like, oh, I can 2x overbet probe on this turn when it comes to low card. There's that. There's also a lot of little singles that you can score by just adjusting better than people who are not accounting for those little notes that the solver telling you clearly you can do. Maybe it's not like the majority line. Like I said, it's like 10, 20%, but they add up. If you assume 20% frequency lead is 0, sure, you play once or twice, you can get away with it. But if you're assuming it's literally 0, and you play your whole career with this c-bet strategy, you're going to leave some money on the table. Now we can go the other way, right? Now the first degree is we're leading at a small blind when we're allowed to, people are not doing. The second degree of adjustment is, oh, people are not leading, so let me start c-betting more. The third degree of adjustment is, okay, I'm supposed to lead here, and I know that guy hasn't done his work, but he's smart enough to know that I have some leads, so I'm going to over check raise to account for that fact. So it's kind of fun that you can get a non-GTO style leveling war within a very GTO framework, and I love that stuff. It's so fun.
That is really funny to get in some weird permutation like that. It's kind of rare I find myself in those, to be honest. It happens every once in a while. Although, I mean, I'm probably biased, but I always feel like I have the advantage with these situations because, I don't know. I just find that it seems that I don't know. I used to just rely on my understanding most of the time. It seems to be good enough. But yeah, some stuff like that's can be really useful. Like I didn't know a whole lot about the whole small blind leading situations, but there are some other situations I can tell you about that I found. There are leads in 3-bet pots, by the way.
Yeah.
I don't know if you knew that.
Yeah, 765 mono especially, but 765 two-tone, lots of lead. Like I think you're leading like 40% of the time.
Okay, I didn't know it was 40%, but I was thinking of like something exactly like that, to be honest, or like 8, 9, 7, something along those lines. There's also I did there was one really weird spot I found. I don't think you needed anything fancy for it, but I did in fact node lock this in the Discord chat because it was so what the like it just wildly surprised me. But it was no antes, and it was like early position versus button 3-bet or something like that. And the thought would be it was like an actual spot that I had in a game, and it was the board was 4-4-4, and I had king queen out of position. I thought, okay, I can't fold this, surely. I mean, on this board, or else I'm really folding a lot. And it turns out that in position does not c-bet 100%, as a lot of people are doing, and c-bet's a larger size, and c-bet's closer to 66%, which wildly surprised me. And like the out of position guys, the strategy is actually supposed to be like even 200 big blinds deep. I feel like I must have done something wrong even talking about it, but it's like checkman raise, like literally checkman raise like 20+%. Like what the is going on right now? And I started no locking. Well, what if we see bet 100% of the time, and then it would like start to lead the turn? Like, and I have to no luck it to not lead the turn because obviously no one does that. But I found like that spot to be really interesting. I don't think I had you look at that one, but yeah, clearly, if you do your work properly, there's definitely some stuff out there that people are not really taking into account.
Oh, totally. I mean, Dan, you can go even farther than that. And this is where, in my opinion, the fun stuff kicks in. And this is more about my personal approach to poker. And that is, you can do stuff that is quote unquote not software allowed, and it's totally fine. I'm talking about like you instead of looking at the software strategy and say, I'm supposed to do this here that percent of the time. In my opinion, the really, really right way to use the software is to not look at the strategy per se, but you got to look at the EV. A lot of time, the EV difference is so small, right? Because the way the software works is if one line makes a little bit more money, it's going to pick that line like all the time. But if you look at the EV difference between one line versus another, a lot of time, the EV difference is like tiny. Sometimes it's like literally zero. I mean, if it's literally zero, it'll be mixed. But we're talking about like as small as it gets, but while the software still picks here one way or another. So to me, the right way to study is to really, really dive deep into the EV difference of different lines and understand what you can get away with. So I think of it as there is not so much looking for what to do as much as to understand what you're not allowed to do. And as long as you stay somewhat clear of the not allowed to do, you have a lot of freedom to go anywhere from block to overbet. You can have at it. You can donk any street. You can check raise at whatever size. So that to me brings back the creativity of the game because now I'm basically having a green light, right? If you really understand what's going on, you would have in your mind a rough idea of how much EV it costs you to take a quote unquote suboptimal line. but you have to weigh that against what your understanding of the actual human opponent is and how much EV they're losing by making them fight on your turf, right? That's one of the main insight in the art of war. You want them to pick the battlefield you're choosing. So by the solver for me is understanding how different terrains, how much it costs you to move to different terrain, and then the execution part of the game is choosing terrain that really puts your opponent in the max pain. And when you net out the two, the cost of choosing a suboptimal line and having a clear view of where your opponent's weak points are, then you can come up in the real world, the real optimal line. And the way to, but the issue is once you go down that path, you're kind of in no man's land. And this to me is where the real poker mastery really pays off, is by understand the game better than your opponent and navigate better than they do. It's kind of like, have you heard of Fisher random chess?
No, I haven't heard of that. I've heard of Art of War, though.
So Fisher random chess is you arrange the chessboard randomly at the start of the game.
Oh, yeah.
The idea is instead of letting people instead of determining who the better player is by who is the more studied, and in some cases straight memorization, you determine who the chess player is by who can adapt to this weird situation better. So what I just described to me is kind of like Fisher random poker. You put them in weird spots, and the guys who are just popping up the solver, kind of semi-memorizing the line and just kind of going through the motion, playing robotically, they will get just murder. Because whenever it's like the Tyson line, right? Everyone has a game plan till they get punched in the mouth, and then it all goes out the window. Like to your point earlier, you have those weird leads, you have those weird check race. When people don't know what's going on, they're not just going to stick a random race in there. A lot of time people freeze up and they just call you, or they just give up and say, I'll take the next one. And the more you can do that, the more you fight on your terrain, the more you can get away with it. And so to me, the ultimate art of studying poker is to know how to fight those battles. It is not to know how to navigate a 5-bet pot better than the next guy. To me, that's just like a hopeless endeavor. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Actually, matter of fact, I had a very similar idea. I would have personally tried to find lines. What I do is try a lot of viable possible strategies, and just see which ones their players are most likely to make a mistake on.